It's not received. It's possible.
Welcome everyone. Just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phones.
Mizmor David. Adonai roi lo achsar. Yinodesha yarbitzin. Almein nuchot yina'alim. Nafshi yishovev yancheni b'madleit tzedek l'ma'an shemo gam ki elech tegei tzalmavet. Lo irara. Ki ata imati. Shivtecha mishantecha. Hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulcha neged sororoi dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi b'veda. Ach tova chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chaya. Shavti b'beit Adonai li'orech yamim. Just offered Psalm 23 in Hebrew. Most appropriate at a funeral, not limited to the funeral, but most appropriate to a funeral as it mentions walking in the valley of the shadow of death. Those who knew Rich knew that he was walking in that valley for quite some time. Please join me in its translation together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. Guideth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our God and God of our ancestors, our rock and our redeemer, 1,000 years in your sight are as a passing day, an hour of night. Our generations come and go while you endure forever. We are always in your hand, O Lord, in death as in life, trusting in your love and in your judgments. The Lord in heaven, strengthen those who mourn the loss of Richard May. Help them to look beyond this moment to realize that death does not destroy the bonds of everlasting love. Sustain them in the knowledge of our faith that you do not abandon souls to the grave, that you do not allow your faithful to suffer oblivion. You, O Lord, have taught us the way of life. Through you, our refuge, we gain eternity. Let us all say. I am Rabbi Jacobski, the rabbi here at BMHBJ, rabbi of Richard and Richard's family. And many of us have been asked to speak today. Many who are here have been asked to speak very briefly, less than 3 minutes. I am the first speaker, and I intend to follow that request and model it for all the others who have been asked to speak briefly. None of us are happy to be here, but none of us is surprised to be here. Richard's gallant battle against his relentless liver disease came to an end this past Shabbat. I walked to the home for a scheduled visit right after services here, and I was greeted upon entering with news that he had passed around 8 a.m. There we were in the bedroom, surrounded by his immediate family, his wife and life partner, Evelyn, his children, Daniel and Jennifer, Abraham and Rachel, Sarah and Terry, and Julia Dell, and even grandchildren, Hannah and Noah. He loved each of them totally, and each of them returned his love with their own. Near the beginning of our Torah, in the book of Genesis, God charges the first humans to take care of the earth, to improve it and make it habitable. Later in the book of Leviticus, the Israelites are told to love our neighbors because our neighbors are just like us. And then later still, the prophet Isaiah encourages us nationally and individually to be the light of, or a light to, the nations. We Jews see these charges and behaviors as a kind of sacred mission statement. Richard's life was completely devoted to each facet of that mission statement. I do not believe I know of one other person in this world who has had such a transformative effect on the world. His vision, his drive, his championing of what some used to call the other, improved the lives of every resident of our city and our state, and of every citizen and would-be citizen of our country. His work was not limited to our country, but embraced other countries as well. In the Middle East, as well as most notably throughout Africa. The list of nonprofit organizations he conceived, or mentored, or advised, or nurtured is astounding. The scope of his work and the results of his effort is mind-boggling when you think about it. He made the world more habitable. He recognized the dignity and value of every human being. And he was literally, and I believe uniquely, a light to many nations. My time is just about up, and that's okay. I'm not able to say everything. I asked Rich once to tell me something about his regret or failures. And he just said one thing. He regretted that his illness had robbed him of the ability to do more, to make the world an even better place than it was because of the work he had already done. So like Rich's work, which he felt was not fully done, this eulogy will remain incomplete as well. All those who are speaking, with the exception perhaps of his family, their eulogies will be incomplete too. But our dedication to carrying on his transformative efforts, living by his values, which were exclusively Jewish values, will complete the eulogies more eloquently and more vitally than any words might otherwise express. We should all merit to live a life as rich as his. I ask to come forward Sheldon Senior, longtime friend of the Mayo family, who will preside over the remainder of our service.
On behalf of the Mayo family, I'd like to welcome everybody who is coming here today. I ask Evelyn and Daniel and Abe to come up to say some words.
Thank you all for being here, and I just wanted to acknowledge that in the long months of taking care of Rich, I could not have done it without Abraham and Daniel and Sarah and Julie Dell, Jenny, Rachel, and Terry, who helped in all manners of care, worked from home at our house, flew across the country multiple times, and just showed up, put their lives on hold, did whatever I needed and whatever their dad needed. So I wrote this on Sunday morning, January 1st. Yesterday I was married. Today I am a widow. Others will talk about Rich's life. I want to talk about his death. When Rich was first diagnosed at St. Joseph's Hospital in February 2021, he went into grief and shock that his life would be coming to an end in a matter of months. He persisted past those predictions and lasted just shy of 2 years. After our tears of disbelief dried, Rich realized he needed to put together a funeral committee. Of course, he drew up a written agenda, and in the summer of 2021, chaired the committee meeting, having enlisted Siri Horowitz, Shelley Senior, and Steve Kapnick as his official escorts. Rich struggled the most after his diagnosis, with having to turn inward and focus on himself. With COVID still a factor, he had already suffered with the diminished stimulation that had come from his early sunup to sundown involvement with others. He gave up a February trip to sunny Florida with his beloved friend, David Henninger. He gave up his planned teaching gig at Regis University. With aggressive medication management, he gave up long distances from a bathroom. Consulting and training continued, but largely from home or the home computer. In July of this year, he had to give up driving, and shortly thereafter, he gave up walking independently. In November, he let go of his fantastic Kaiser healthcare with all of its outpatient and inpatient intensity and signed up with Brighton Hospice. In the last 2 weeks of his life, he wasn't able to get out of bed. Through this 22-month odyssey, Rich did not complain. He did not get depressed, although he was very, very disappointed. He did not become bitter or resentful. He did not say, why me? He also did not eat leftovers the next day after I made him his favorite food. He did not make demands, nor did he compare his lack of good health to others' better genetics. He fought hard to stay alive. He continued to welcome visitors even as his capabilities diminished. He said he wasn't afraid. He said he wasn't anxious. He said he wasn't in pain. Instead, he said he felt powerful and could continue to stay among the living. He bravely hung on even though he could no longer eat or even sip from a straw. But he held my hand tightly the last night of his life, communicating with squeezes and eye blinks. It was easy to satisfy his last and most fervent wish, to be surrounded by the kids and me when he slipped away from this earth. Ever the mentor, he died a good, vibrant, and brave-hearted death.
I will be delivering the eulogy for my father. Rich Mail was born on July 26, 1945, and raised in Portchester, New York. His lifelong friends, Jacob and Roy Colbert, are both here with us today, while his other dear friend from Portchester, Marvin Fite, passed away earlier last year. Our dad liked to say that he inherited the best of both of his parents. His entrepreneurial abilities from his mother, Jeanette Goldwitz-Mail, and his unquenchable desire to help others from his father, Seymour. My grandma was orphaned at 9 and had to fight her way to independent adulthood. My grandpa lost his own father very early in life. Together, Jeanette and Seymour instilled in our dad, as well as our Uncle Steve, a drive toward Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Our dad had legends of his own childhood. He developed a stutter following surgery as a toddler, which sensitized him to the suffering of others. This was the root of his passion that led to all of his work with the disability community. He considered his brother the smart one, which likely contributed to his humility. He loved that his father answered the phone. "This is Seymour, how can I help you?" As everyone here can attest, our dad always put others before himself. Our grandma Jeanette wanted him to go into business, and when he finished college, he worked at JCPenney's in the women's lingerie department. No one surprised. After a stint in California and the first of many extensive road trips on his motorcycle, Dad landed at Washington University, St. Louis, to earn his master's in social work. Now, this was the 1970s, and his degree was in the community development aspects rather than clinical aspects of social work. Rich found the work gratifying, particularly when he was pissing off the right people, especially since his specific degree correlated with not being able to generate income, which my mom always appreciated so much. In fact, his least happy year-long contract was the year he made the most money. After organizing in the Mississippi Delta of Missouri, my dad found himself in Salt Lake City. He liked to say Utah was the only place where he was called a Gentile, since the Mormons considered themselves one of the lost tribes of Israel. He was an early director of the Crossroads Urban Center, empowered by the knowledge that the only non-Mormon governor in Utah history at the time was a Jew, Simon Bamberger. My dad once wrote, "A good organizer is always annoyed with things, and he has to have a sense of the absurd. It's a thankless job. The real thanks come when they tell you about 2 years down the line that they don't need you anymore." So after Utah, he started the Community Resource Center, CRC, in Denver. He met my mom here in 1983 when she was referred to him to help her as the new director of Western Solidarity. Mentorship quickly evolved into courtship, and they got married in 1985 in Philadelphia, where my mom grew up. My mother relates that when she met my dad, he was wanted in several states for trespasses related to a variety of direct actions he helped to organize. Though impressed with the nearly 24 police contacts my father had already accumulated when they met, she made him agree to no more arrests once my brother Abe was born in 1986. Much to his chagrin, and out of respect for my mom and his promise, he never returned to jail. After leaving the Community Resource Center in the capable hands of the late Steve Graham, he founded his own nonprofit consultancy, Richard Male and Associates. Our dad worked with organizations of every size, but his passion was helping small nonprofits and local activists to find their voice. In his memoirs, he asked us to remember that throughout the whole history of social change, any improvement has come through grassroots organizing, because that's where real change happens. First local, then state, then federal. His legacy will live on in the countless grassroots movements he supported, and it will continue to blossom if those left behind honor his request. Despite famously working 15 hours a day, he indeed had a rich life outside of work. As a fearless person throughout most of his life, he was an avid motorcyclist until well into his 70s. In 2019, he lived out a lifelong dream doing a motorcycle road trip with one of his kids. I had left New York and moved back to Denver, got my motorcycle license, bought a bike, and rode with my dad for 8 days throughout Colorado and Utah. We used Bluetooth headsets, and our call signs were Stud, his, and Zorro, mine. We rode over 1,500 miles in gorgeous country. Conversation waxed and waned between discussing the scenery and sleeping plans for the evening, and a silence full of solace, protected by the knowledge that we were only a Stud or Zorro away. What my father loved to do in his spare time was organize meetings and read papers. However, he did in fact have a real hobby, which was gardening. Every February, our dad would start farming in the laundry room downstairs with his grow lights and fertilizer, embracing the clean clothes as they came out of the dryer. Shortly before COVID, he fulfilled another long-held dream and became a master gardener through Colorado State University, which then led him to create partnerships with community gardens throughout the Denver metro area. Growing up, he tried to indoctrinate us kids into horticulture, but we showed little talent or interest. Only when I hit my 30s did I come to seriously enjoy gardening and thoroughly appreciate his knowledge. In 2019, I became his protege and primary assistant, helping to prepare, plant, prune, and pick from his 5 vegetable beds and hundreds of square feet of flower gardens. I now proudly have a vegetable and flower garden of my own that I cultivated solely from the knowledge I gained from him. My father had countless virtues, but his greatest was compassion. He was undoubtedly the most compassionate person I've ever known. Once, when I was recovering from jaw surgery, I was struck by the look on his face as he stared into mine, as if he was experiencing my pain and trying to suffer it in my place. My father famously got along marvelously with people. Little things didn't bother him, which was useful since he was married to my mother, who actually did have an opinion every once in a while about how the house should be run. He loved schmoozing with people. He was just as happy interviewing a local stranger quietly fishing in Berkeley Lake, near where we used to live, as he was talking to any of the many guests we used to have for Shabbat meals. Like all great dads, he loved our mom and his kids more than anything. He showered us with unconditional love and imparted the lessons of practice what you preach, stand up for what you believe in, and ask the dinner guests lots of questions to make them feel special. Our dad has more true friends than anyone I know. Friends that showed up for him through thick and thin, and he for them. Friends with the self-assurance to shine in the light that he emitted. Friends he kept from childhood and from every decade of his life. Through his work, travel, friends he met through my mom, as well as friends he met through the Jewish community. He made new friends every year, but never let any of them go. Of the countless values I have inherited from my dad, the value of friendships and the lessons on how to maintain them are the greatest. Thank you all for coming.
My name is Abraham, Rich's son. These comments were written by my dad after his diagnosis to be read at his funeral. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend my funeral. Everyone in this room, plus many others not here, have played an important role in my growth, development, and impact. While I look back at my decades on this earth and almost 55 years as an activist, trainer, and coach, building organizations that help people, I'm totally proud of my accomplishments. Even though I've had many failures in my life, my overall impact is positive. All I can ask is that we all leave this world in better shape than we came into it. Sometimes that impact is not on a macro or systems level, but it is on the people that we have touched, helped to grow and develop, and above all, helped to find their voice. From my work in the Mississippi Delta on civil rights and learning how to mobilize people to Saul Lindsay Institute, to moving out to Colorado and forming the Community Resource Center, Colorado Nonprofit Association, Community Shares in Colorado, Colorado Grants Guide, and establishing rural philanthropy, I am very pleased with many of the results. Spending 12 years playing a role in the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, working in the anti-redlining campaign, and helping to pass the Community Reinvestment Act, plus many local efforts, makes me proud of rousing the voices of so many people. I've been privileged to work internationally, and I got to eat with people, share their homes, and help them provide strength, power, and dignity to their communities. Just a few of the memories I treasure are working in the Middle East with Arab mayors in Israel, meeting with people who came to Vienna when the Berlin Wall broke down, and talking with them about the values of non-governmental organizations. Assisting Mayan women in Guatemala to press for women's reproductive freedom. Helping folks in Mongolia to develop a responsible mining policy. Working for over 15 years in Eastern Africa on animal welfare, elephant, and other wildlife issues. Getting books to Ethiopian children on a donkey library, and then developing over 75 libraries in one of Africa's poorest countries. Spending 5 weeks in Botswana helping to strengthen HIV nonprofit organizations. And working with friends in South Africa to help build a 7-country coalition around animal welfare issues. I've been teaching for over 50 years. I've been blessed and graced to teach at the graduate level at various universities on leadership, social justice, and community organizing. This provided so many opportunities for my own growth and in a small way to help empower others. My real thanks, appreciation, and blessings need to be bestowed on my wonderful, loving, and kind children. I am so proud of Abraham, who has made an impact being a captain in the U.S. Marine Corps, and with Jenny in raising 2 beautiful grandchildren of mine. Daniel is such a special son who has helped take care of me, who took a year off and traveled around the world, discovering his passions and other cultures. Sarah is such a unique and special person who exceeded all of my expectations. She graduated community college and is now registered in the School of Social Work at Metro State University. Julie Dell, I am so very proud of the impact you have already made and will make as a nurse and a midwife. You have a magic touch with people. The most important person in my life is Evelyn, who has been with me over 38 years. She is my best friend, supporter, fan, and wife. I can't say enough about how you have loved me for all these years, went with me to every medical appointment, and been with me all the time. I love you so much, it is hard to describe. My biggest regret is not seeing all of my friends in the future and being around for my kids and my present and future grandchildren. We are all dealt cards, and we try to play them out in a loving, impactful, and giving way. A legacy is only important if you leave it to others to carry on in the future. My hope and prayer is that each of you in this room and so many others are part of my legacy and the future of the world. I love you and miss you, Richard.
When you think of rich, you think people, you think heart. You don't necessarily think Jewish. Rich didn't wear his Judaism on his sleeve, so to speak. But if you did bring up religion with him, it was immediately apparent how powerfully he identified with his faith and how strong his faith was. So it's really not surprising that Rich was, in a sense, the quintessential Jew, a true inheritor of our forebears. The Jewish story starts with Abraham and Sarah, who displayed great chesed, loving kindness. This is actually different from rachamim, which is compassion. Rich was obviously a deeply compassionate person, as Daniel just attested to. When he saw need, it touched him, and he responded in any and every way that he could. Yet, chesed is a level beyond compassion, beyond feeling and responding when confronted with need. Chesed is an inner drive to seek out ways to give, not only reacting to something that you encounter. It's being proactive. It's written, Avraham Zaken Ba Bayami, and Abraham was old. He had come into his days. What does that mean, come into his days? What does it tell us? We're taught that Abraham came into each day seeking ways to give of himself, to be helpful. To him, a day that didn't include chesed was a day lost. Rich male came into his days. He was driven by a force that came from the depths of his neshama, his soul. How can I help? How can I be of service? It didn't matter if you were a family member, a friend, or anyone else. A person was a person. I would be happy to talk with her or him. I would be happy to meet with them. That was Rich. He would be fully present and his heart was open. His wisdom was for sharing. That was the whole point of it. From the individual level, counseling, mentoring, encouraging, or just listening empathetically, to teaching, helping so many to grow and reach their potential, to his organizational work, which of course is legendary. He was masterful, all in his uniquely gentle, understated way. One never sensed his own ego. It wasn't about him. Rich words are inadequate, but they're what we have right now. We reap what we sow. The seeds of love that you have sown will grow and flourish and spread in us, in your community, and in the world at large, more and more as time goes on. Again, like Abraham, you were and are a bracha, a blessing to us all. You touched me deeply, as you did each member of my family. On behalf of Anne and I and our children, we love you dearly. I'd like to call on David Henninger now, please.
I came up here with mixed emotions. One is celebratory. And by celebratory, I mean celebrating a life well lived. And I feel very good in knowing Richard and knowing that he lived a life that should be celebrated by all of us that are here. I also have the feeling of sadness. And when I contacted Evelyn and Daniel on Thursday and asked if I could come over this last Friday, Evelyn said, no, I think you probably should come over right now. And so I did, and I really value being asked to do that. I was able to say goodbye, and to me that was an honor. It was a sad honor, but it also reflected on the celebratory part of my relationship with Richard for 30 plus years. I was reminded too that in his last days, the response to being touched, he would respond to being touched physically. And I know that for me, it's not always comfortable to be touched, but Richard and I would sneak away and he craved sometimes a hamburger. And so we would go to the Cherry Cricket and have a hamburger. And he would just gently reach over to my hand and touch it and rub it. And at first I was a little uncomfortable with that. And then I thought, wow, this is really incredible. What a neat feeling. What a neat feeling. And every time I saw Richard after that, he would do the same thing. There are two things about Richard that stood out to me over the many, many years that I knew him. One was, he was a strategic genius. And I mean that, I'm not being flippant when I use that word. It's not a word that usually I refer to people as, but his ability to strategize and do that on the fly was amazing, amazing, amazing. I learned from that all the time. I tried to emulate that strategic thinking because his goal, as he said many, many times, is to win. And by winning, that meant the underdog. That meant the little guy, the little organization, the one that was often ignored. I remember an organization that preceded CRC, not by much, but that director worked with the elite nonprofits in the state of Colorado. And when he met Rich for the first time, he said, you know, you're doomed not to be able to succeed with what you're trying to do. Grassroots organizations never make it, they never survive, and I'll be here long after CRC is gone. Well, wrong. CRC is still here. That particular organization is no longer around, and that was something that really influenced me in my life. It's already been stated, but Richard loved people. And it was that love of people that shone through. He was egoless in many, many, many ways. He and I taught together at Regis University in the master's program for 20 years. Rich was there a little bit longer than I was, because he started a few years before I did. But during that time, as you might imagine, Richard stirred up a few things in that university, and was perpetually a thorn in the side of what I perceived as someone who was not afraid to deal with and speak truth to power. And I saw that over and over and over again with Richard. And I don't know how many people in this room get inhibited by speaking truth openly to power in front of lots of people. Sometimes that can be embarrassing. Sometimes one can get tongue-tied. Sometimes we just don't say anything. And Richard would speak out to the point where you could just feel the discomfort because it was so straight on and so powerful. And he said what most of us just didn't dare say. And that led to a lot of change in our community for the better. He also, it was mentioned earlier, his ability to recognize that faith-based organizations have a lot of good to offer, and his ability to communicate and relate to faith-based organizations, not just in Denver, but all over, was amazing because he helped mobilize a lot of faith-based organizations to do things that I don't think they would have necessarily done if it had been for his initiative and his push. His will to live these last 1 year and 10 months was absolutely astounding to me. And we talked sometimes for hours, and he would say, gee, I really feel bad because my life doesn't have meaning at this point to me. And I would say to him, it has a lot of meaning to me because you're showing me what it means to live and to die with grace and peace. And that is helpful to me. So whether you call that meaningful or not, Richard, it's meaningful to me and you're helping me. I never knew Richard to gossip. I never heard him yell out in rage, even though there's a lot of things in our society to be rageful about. And the bottom line is that for me personally, I love Richard. And I mean that in the deepest way. He was a unique individual. I'm going to miss him, but there's a lot of him that is contained within me, and it's certainly obviously contained within his family. Thank you very much. Susan is next.
I first heard of Rich Mail in 1984, when my dear friend Alan, who I have known since age 11, simply pronounced, I think I met the man I'm going to marry. Many years have passed since then. In the last few years, I was privileged to spend more time with Rich, and our friendship deepened. Probably one of the only gifts of a long illness is that life gets pared down to the essentials, perhaps letting us see each other in a clearer way. Over this past Shabbat, we read the Torah portion by Yigash, which is also the portion of Sarah's birth and Bat Mitzvah. It tells the story of Jacob and of Joseph and his brothers. After many years of heartbreak and disappointment, there comes a critical moment on which future time pivots. Judah and Joseph, estranged brothers, stand face to face. Judah approaches. He simply steps forward. In doing so, He opens the way to rebuild a damaged relationship and broken world. The brothers are finally able to see each other honestly. I have been deeply touched by the way Rich lived his life. He realized early on that it was relationships which are the key to coalition building. He had a great gift of being able to see people for who they are, and maybe even who they are able to become. Rich's work took him all over the world. Rather than staying in hotels, he often chose to live with one of the team members, learning about them and their families, and this fostered not just work associations, but deep and lasting friendships. I know that when we talked, I felt like he truly saw me, which is one of the most powerful gifts we could give one another. His special ability was the spark that drove his work. Rich and I both share a love of gardening, and he earned the title of Master Gardener. But I also came to think that his garden was a universal one. He felt a strong obligation to care for the work for the earth and its creatures. He, like Judah, was able to step forward again and again. On my last trip to Denver, I asked him if he could take in all the love and admiration which so many people were sending him. He replied, "My job has never been to elevate myself, and I don't see myself that way. My job has been to shine the light on others." And so I believe his light will shine on. He touched so many lives here in Denver and all over the world. And all of us here, I know we have all been touched by his life as well. And we carry that forward. Ours is next.
To Evelyn, Abraham, Daniel, Sarah, Julia, and your entire family, thank you. My name is Morris Price, and I am honored to have been asked to serve by Rich and then Evelyn to say a few words. I'm not going to share anything new that you haven't already heard. What a spectacular person Rich was in every way, but made a little surprise every now and then by what he meant to me personally. Lo and behold, it will be brief. Now, I'm the grandson of two Baptist ministers, so I understand how challenging that can be behind me. I had the fortune of being a member of the 2000 College Trust Fellows, the graduate of Regent University's Master's Nonprofit Management Program. And if I can ask, if you have been a student of Rich or a member of that program, would you raise your hand? What a powerful legacy Rich leaves in those of us who are left to do the work that he visioned. I received my master's degree, and that transformed my career in life. But I didn't realize I'd get a lifelong mentor, advocate, and life coach. This is the third most difficult time I've spoken at Memorial. The first two were my mom and my dad. What people do not know is that Rich helped edit my remarks to my father. The first draft, Rich said, "This is not an academic paper. You're not reading his autobiography, speak like his only son." The last 20 years of my life, I've been fortunate to have Rich in my corner. First as a faculty member, a thesis advisor, and then as a personal friend and mentor. A phrase I do not take lightly when asked to do the same. I've had the fortune of knowing what it's like to have a true, powerful advocate in your life who can love you and support you unconditionally. That is a powerful thing for a Black gay man in America. Rich never made me doubt who I was, and in many times reminded me of who I need to be. Whether we were taking on a challenging new billion-dollar foundation that didn't do right by its people, there was Rich. When I left to go work for the Guild Foundation and taking on the Black church and LGBT rights, it was Rich who gave me the role of how to build advocates. When I went to work with Congressman Diana Gett and taught me the patience of working with Congress, but understood I had a goal to make change happen at the federal level, there was Rich. When I decided to run a nonprofit for something simply as fundraising, building a board, there was Rich calling to ask, "What can I do for you?" It's not uncommon for Rich to do that. That's uncommon in nonprofits when someone asks, "What can I do for you?" versus "What can you do for me?" I can't recall when I ever left the time with Rich, but I leave more informed, more inspired, and more appreciated and more self-confident. It was a big issue for community, but it was a big issue for Rich. If he could annoy someone to get it done, he was gonna annoy someone to get it done. I wouldn't have thought that Rich and I would have anything in common. I am an inside, fight the outside guy. Rich was on the outside, always fighting in. To truly understand the impact of Rich is not to measure what he did in multiple continents or how he changed issues on many countries or in communities. But it was the latter part of each of our 2-hour, 3-hour conversations. He would talk about his family. I knew of his children for years before I actually met them. I had heard of Evelyn Piss Rock, and that was very similar to my father and my mother. We found a kindred space in talking about family as a space to move forward into our own work. With Rich, it was never so much about what you were doing, but what can you do for others? At the end of every conversation with my dad, he would say they're lucky to have you. At the end of every conversation with Rich, he'll remind you didn't get here by accident. Now go do something with it. I said something about Rich when he was with us, when I would often question, what did I do to deserve the blessing of Rich in my life, much like my father? And after asking that question for too many years, I decided, it's not what did I do to deserve the blessing of Rich, it's what do I do with the blessing of Rich in my life. With that, you look forward to what you can do to change. I never left the meeting with Rich without believing that people mattered, that my voice and change was possible. That whether you come here from across the street or across the nation, you understand from Rich's point of view that your voice and your advocacy matters. Whether you come here as a racial minority or a religious minority, you understand that your voice and people matter. Rich had a firm belief that advocacy, activism, and sometimes making a powerful shut fear you was the most powerful tool we have left in this country that has considerable amount of change that needs to happen. It's not whether you're comfortable, it's whether how comfortable you can make those who seek joy in your passion, in your pain. If there's ever a quote that is true, it should have been written by and said by Rich, that never doubt that a small group of people, committed individuals, can change the world. In fact, if you looked at Rich Mayo, it's the only thing that ever did. Okay. And now I'll ask Jake.
I'm honored to speak about my friend Rich. He's my dear friend Dickie. Everyone here knows him as Rich. He's my friend Dickie. 77 years of friendship. I was his capitalist friend. He was my social conscience. Our close, and I mean close friendship, existed all, we never lived in the same city since I was 9 years old. We were just drawn together wherever we were, no matter what the situation was. However, over the years, it was just a relationship that was a family and friends. Every Christmas vacation during our college years, he came down to Houston where I lived. And my sister, God may she rest in peace, was one of Dickie's greatest admirers. But it was always a situation, I have to find Dickie a date. But Dickie, you have to learn how to dress. Even when you have a suit on at your best time, you can't wear those white socks, Dickie. You have to do something different. It was a special friendship that we had, and one that I can't tell you could ever be reproduced. I will always remember a trip that he asked me and Roy Boy to go on. It was a river rafting trip. If anyone knows me, they know that I'm not a camper. Never will be, couldn't be.
Dickie, what are you doing to me? Well, it was one of the most joyful times of my life. Something that I always will remember, something that, as all of you appreciate him as an individual, he could make anyone feel comfortable at any time. He was a true Mitch. Yeah, we had the highs and lows of life. We both went through them. Some very tough times. He and I were able to make them happen. Dickie met Evelyn. I met Susan. We often talked about how we met these two strong women, how two strong men were able to deal with these two strong women. But we both fell in love. We both were blessed with the relationship, created lovely families. We were blessed forever. I will miss our time together. Our closeness is something that couldn't be asked to be reproduced elsewhere. I will miss you, my dear. Please, may you rest in peace.
It's an honor to be up here, especially sandwiched between Jay and Roy. Found good friends, I believe, going way back. So I feel the same kind of friendship with Rich, even though it hasn't been for that long a time. Last night I was reading emails from Rich between us, and there are many hundreds over the years. One was the director of the Center for Environmental Action in Nairobi, Kenya. Rich was promoting a strategy to organize the conservation groups in Kenya to demonstrate and pressure the government to limit construction planned for the iconic Nairobi National Park, which shares a boundary with the capital city. It was a comprehensive approach, including a letter writing campaign to hotels and private concerns, positioning themselves for self-interest initiatives into the national park, the only wildlife park of its kind. Rich was all about community organizing. He was tenacious, taking lessons learned from Saul Alinsky and his friend and mentor, Pablo Eisenberg. I first met Rich in the 50s. I'm sorry, in the 1970s, not quite that far. He was leading a community organization meeting in Trinidad, Colorado, where I was the newly hired executive director of Los Angeles County Rehabilitation Center. Our paths crossed again in the 1980s with Atlantis and the establishment of independent living centers for people with disabilities throughout Colorado. This is when community organizing for the disabled was led by people like Wade Blank, if you remember. Rich was in the background, figuring out ways to bring attention to the limitations of public transportation, specifically RTD. During these times, I was employed by the State Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, also in the background, writing program plans for funding for the federal government to support the independent living nonprofit organizations as part of the amendments to the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. I remember the defining moment for the disability community when an Atlantis organization rolled a dozen or so people in wheelchairs to the intersection of Colfax and Colorado Boulevard with sledgehammers in hand, slamming curbs to demonstrate the lack of curb cuts. Also, this went on while the local news channels were there recording the demonstration. This was another page in Denver's history, adding to the momentum for wheelchair access on the streets as well as lifts onto public buses, not to be overshadowed with inroads for the hearing loss community and equal access for sign language and translation services. Rich never deviated from his passion to encourage and teach the underrepresented to meet power and privilege head on. In 2009, while we were entering retirement age, Rich and I teamed up to serve on two boards, the African Network for Animal Welfare in Nairobi and the newly formed sister organization by the same name in Denver. Over the last 14 years, Rich and I shared trips to Nairobi for board meetings, as well as enjoyed meeting the people of Kenya and the animals too on many, many safaris. This extended to sharing experiences over time with our families and especially our wives, Kathy and Ellen. All this is to say is Rich and I were close friends. In the last year, since I've known of Rich's diagnosis, we walked as often as we could, many times at least once a week around the lake at Garfield Park. We discussed family, theology, politics, conservation, and animal welfare. And we also would go out for a hamburger. Yes, they like hamburgers. The distinguishing characteristics in Rich's personality are his extraordinary gifts to teach, to listen, to support, and to love. Rich had a huge heart and a way of listening to who you are. He touched my life, and I will be forever grateful for this. Rich had tremendous love and care for people and animals, like Moses and King David. He was chosen to lead because of his compassion for life. If there is a message in all of this, it is that we take with us the inspiration to love and fight at the same time, to fight for the living and the alive, and that life will be shared into the future. This, I believe, was what Rich was all about. I will miss Rich greatly. Thank you. Roy?
My name's Roy, and as you've heard, I'm also known as White Boy. I am on the clock, sir. Richie, Jay, myself, we started our life's journey in Port Chester, New York, 3/4 of a century ago. We would play in each other's backyards, but grown-ups allowed. Our days were filled with adventure, discovery, just enough mischief, so that I'm sure our parents referred to us as the usual suspects. We will ever remain blessed within our love for each other. You know, there came a time I got a call from Evelyn, and she said, we're going to put an addition onto our house, and that's all I needed. Flew out, spent a week, did what I had to do to help the project move along. Rich and I would talk about growing older. That is compulsory. Although, as some in the family may have observed, for the three of us, actually growing up is optional. At the same time, being with Richie came the realization that the longer we live, the more beautiful life becomes. What I learned from Rich, among many things, he would use his self-reliance and his sense of independence to create opportunities for, as we've heard earlier, uncharted strategies and tactics that are outside what is familiar. His focus was on what can be accomplished. His toughness, his determination, and his bravery has inspired me to strengthen my own character and my own resolve. You know, as Rich encountered the absurdities of life, and they do occur daily, he was aroused to action. For him, it was personal. Richie became a revolutionary in the truest sense of the word, to restore meaning to his life. And yet, Richie being Rich, thinking, at the same time, he welcomed those. He welcomed those, the merits of their character, the contents of their heart. Care deeply about what is true and what is just. We are all here in this place, in this moment, to fully know this man's life. If I may paraphrase, that it may not be so important, except, as with Richard Ira Mail, the impact that his life has had on the lives of others. I love you so much, my friend.
Hi, I'm Mandy. I've known Rich for more than 30 years, which listening to some of you today is really not long, but it's been a joy and a privilege to work with him in so many different projects here in the US and throughout the world. I traveled a lot with him in the US, but the foreign travel I experienced only vicariously as I edited his adventures. It's probably a good thing, as I don't remember ever traveling with Rich in fine weather. I've heard many people refer to Rich as a force of nature. This is true, in that he was a magnet for nature's catastrophes. He attracted hurricanes and winter storms the way that trailer parks attract tornadoes. But the thing was, he didn't believe these things were happening, or that he should in any way defer or alter his personal plans to accommodate them. Traveled with him to Ohio when a Colorado blizzard shut down DIA and prevented our return home for 2 days. Ridiculous, he said, just a few flakes. He insisted we fly to Minneapolis just before Christmas, even though Minnesota was predicting weather that would close down the state. Nonsense, he said. We got home just in time, but I know that if we hadn't, Rich would have given me the finest Christmas that Minneapolis could provide. I remember us hurtling up the New York State Thruway, again in December, again in a howling blizzard that he had told me would amount to nothing. Snow swirled around us. Rental car steadily disassembled and disintegrated. One of my last trips for Rich was to join him in Philadelphia in September of 1999. He was already there. Rich, I said, the forecast looks bad. Hurricane Floyd is heading toward Pennsylvania. Nonsense, he said. It's going to miss Philadelphia completely. I've dutifully set off with storm predictions worsened, and my plane got diverted to Pittsburgh. Philadelphia was devastated, but Rich was always unscathed. To me, Rich was a rock. He gave me so much, he taught me so much, and he shared so much. But when he told me in 2021 that he didn't have long to live, I couldn't take it. He asked me if I would help him to write his memoirs. Of course I was flattered, and then panicked. How could we capture the magnitude of such a love in such a short time? Back then, we were looking at the 3 to 6 months prognosis the doctors had given me. And clearly that was nonsense too. One of the things that Rich taught me was how to delegate. And he came to me that night as I wept into my gin and tonic. So we could ask his friends and family to tell his story. Project started in a very small way. I invited a few friends that he had suggested, but it grew and blossomed from there, thanks to everyone who helped spread the word and came forward to contribute. I'm so grateful to his family and to my friends Joe Morrow and Laura Bond, and to Kathy Calder, the designer who captured Rich in all his glory among his tomatoes. I'm so glad that we could all come together to help Rich create his memoirs. And I'm forever grateful that in this way he had tangible proof of how much people loved him and honored him in his legacy. How many people get to experience that before they die? I thank all of you who made that happen. It's Lindsay.
Rich and I had matching teal shirts. Coincidentally, and when by coincidence we would wear them on the same day, he never seemed surprised. In fact, he never seemed that surprised by anything. By the time I started working with him, he had traveled so far and wide, met so many wildly wonderful and also terrible people, that the shock of an odd occurrence or occasion was usually met with a half nod and a pithy response. To get to that place where your perspective is 360 degrees, where the nonsensical nature of things is accepted, welcomed even, is quintessentially Rich male. In addition, sorry Jay, to his bold sense of fashion, Rich mentored me in how to ask questions, how to get the whole story down, preferably on a iPad. How to talk your bank into waiving overdraft fees. Why you should prioritize advocacy, and that change comes from grassroots community organizing. He showed me that community and family are the cornerstones of life, and he introduced me to all the best Asian restaurants in Denver. Rich was the one so many of us look to for advice, perspective, and courage. I can only hope that as I continue to grow in ways that would make him proud, I will still be wearing that teal shirt. Thank you.
I'm Sarah Gorovitz. I was at the original planning meeting, which for so long it was an abstraction. I could keep it in denial. Rich and I had many conversations about it. And I just want to say, Rich, you did a great job. I am so grateful for your presence in my life, Rich, and in my family's. I cherish the many ways you influenced my life. They are seeds planted and watered by you, the master gardener. Joya from Feldman's will shortly direct those of us who will be traveling to Rose Hill Cemetery. And now will the pallbearers please come forward to accompany me. Rachel, Jenny, Joya.
I'll ask everyone to stay seated while we escort the casket. We do have an escorted procession today. There are directions if you didn't get it when you signed in at the table out front. Please just be sure to pay very close attention. We won't be obeying traffic laws. We'll put our hazards on, so please drive very safely on your way to Rose Hill.
Rise.
And I am still waiting inside, feeling the power and seeing how you raise me up so I can stand up now. Raise me up from stormy seas. Your soul and I